Have you ever wondered why some women seem to command a man's entire being without lifting a finger, without uttering a single promise, without even brushing his skin? It is as though an invisible current moves between them, silent yet irresistible. A magnetism born not from action, but from presence. Carl Jung would say such forces emerge from the unconscious, where archetypes dwell, shaping human attraction with the gravity of ancient stars. What stirs within the man is not merely lust or desire, but a confrontation with something larger than himself, something that echoes with the voice of myth, shadow, and soul. The feminine that seduces without touching is not acting. She is being. She becomes a mirror in which his secret longings are reflected, and in that mirror he does not see her. He sees himself. He sees the anima he has projected upon her, the soft but dangerous image of the eternal feminine that he has carried since birth. In her stillness, in her silence, he encounters the mystery of his own incompleteness. This is why she does not need to touch him. Her presence alone unearths the unfinished business of his unconscious, summoning both hunger and fear in equal measure. The modern mind often mistakes seduction for a performance, lipstick, clothing, rehearsed gestures. But true seduction of the unconscious is something far older, almost primal. It requires no costume. It requires only alignment with archetypal power, the kind that cannot be manufactured because it is lived. Jung would remind us that the unconscious responds not to what is fabricated, but to what resonates with ancient memory. When a woman stands sovereign in herself, when she does not bow to the restless expectations of men, she becomes untouchable in the most erotic way. Her distance is a fire. Her detachment is a storm. You have seen this before, even if you did not name it. The woman who walks into a room and says almost nothing, yet every man present feels compelled to turn his head. She does not need to flaunt, because she emanates. Her allure is not in what she reveals, but in what she withholds. That withholding is not cruelty, it is power. It tells the unconscious male psyche, here is a boundary you cannot cross. Here is a mystery you cannot consume. And precisely because he cannot consume it, he becomes consumed by it. Stoic philosophers like Seneca and Epictetus spoke of mastery over desire as the highest virtue. But they also admitted that what we try hardest to resist often becomes the most intoxicating. The man who tells himself he can remain untouched by her ends up revisiting her image in the solitude of his mind, haunted by what he cannot grasp. He confuses his yearning for her with love, but what he is truly addicted to is the reflection of his own incompleteness. Jung called this projection. The anima projected onto a woman turns her into more than flesh and bone. She becomes symbol, myth, unattainable salvation. The woman who understands this does not need to manipulate. She simply refuses to betray her essence. She does not give herself away cheaply. She is not cruel, yet she is not available. Her very restraint becomes erotic. Her absence, paradoxically, is felt more deeply than the presence of those who try desperately to please. And in this absence, the man begins to unravel, for absence leaves room for imagination, and imagination is the most dangerous lover of all. What happens within him is not casual. It is archetypal warfare. His ego tells him he is in control, yet his unconscious whispers otherwise. He cannot explain why her silence feels louder than another woman's song, why her distance feels closer than another woman's embrace. He begins to realize he is no longer chasing her. He is chasing himself. For in her mystery, he finds the shadow he has long ignored, the emptiness he has refused to confront. You may think seduction lies in action, but Jung would tell you the deepest seduction lies in what is withheld, in silence, in stillness, in refusal to be possessed. The unconscious does not respond to abundance of gesture, but to scarcity, to restraint, to the echo of what is missing. The woman who unconsciously seduces does so because she embodies paradox. She is near yet far, warm yet untouchable, present yet elusive. She awakens a man not by fulfilling him, but by leaving him unsettled. And here lies the first truth. The feminine that seduces without touching does not enslave. She liberates. She forces the man to reckon with himself, to confront the hollowness beneath his hunger. He may call it attraction, he may call it obsession, but in truth, it is initiation. He is being drawn into the depths of his own unconscious, where shadows lurk and transformation waits. The woman does not seduce to destroy, but to awaken. The paradox is that she rarely knows she is doing it. Her allure is unconscious, born from alignment with her essence. And it is precisely because she does not perform that her magnetism cannot be denied. The man who encounters such a woman is faced with a choice: remain addicted to the fantasy or enter the deeper work of becoming whole. The seduction deepens not through movement but through atmosphere. It is in the way she occupies silence without apology, as if silence itself were her companion. Men accustomed to noise, to constant reassurance, find themselves unsettled when faced with a woman who does not rush to fill the air with explanations or demands. Her quietness is not absence, it is presence. It is the presence of a mind that does not bend, of a soul that refuses to be hurried. Jung spoke often of the tension of opposites, the unbearable pull between what is desired and what is feared. In her silence, that tension becomes unbearable, for he begins to sense that she cannot be persuaded, cannot be owned, cannot be absorbed into his ego. The feminine power here is not aggression, but withdrawal, not the frantic chase of approval, but the calm certainty that she does not need him to complete her. The man feels this in his bones, though he may never articulate it. It gnaws at him. Why does she not rush forward as others do? Why does she not seek his validation, his attention, his approval? That lack of need is the greatest seduction of all. It says to his unconscious, here is someone whole. Here is someone who does not orbit around you. Here is someone you cannot conquer. And in that recognition, obsession is born. For what the ego cannot conquer, it cannot forget. He remembers the woman who withheld more than the one who surrendered, the woman who chose solitude over his company more than the one who begged for closeness. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the mind becomes colored by the thoughts it dwells upon. The man who encounters such a woman finds his mind permanently colored, stained by the image of her detachment. It lingers, long after she is gone. But there is something deeper at work. The woman who unconsciously seduces without touching is not performing. She is not plotting. She simply embodies the archetype of the sovereign feminine, the woman aligned with her own center, unshaken by the need for external recognition. Jung would say she has touched the self, that inner wholeness, where the conscious and unconscious unite. In her presence, the man senses what he has not yet achieved within himself. He does not merely desire her, he envies her. He envies the freedom she carries, the unbothered serenity of one who is not waiting for permission to exist. This is why her absence feels like a wound. It is not the loss of her body he mourns, but the loss of the reflection she once offered him. In her, he glimpsed his own unfinished wholeness. When she withdraws, the mirror shatters, and he is left staring at himself, alone, incomplete, haunted. His desire is less about her and more about the version of himself he believes he could be if only she would stay. But the paradox remains. She will not stay, not on those terms. She is not a vessel for his projection. She is her own vessel. You too may feel the temptation to explain, to reassure, to ease the discomfort of silence. But understand this. The most magnetic women are those who do not apologize for being mysteries. To be a mystery is not to be manipulative. It is to honor that the soul cannot be fully known by another. It is to resist the pressure of collapsing into accessibility, of making oneself endlessly available. There is strength in scarcity, and scarcity awakens desire more than abundance ever could. This is why detachment intoxicates. The man does not long for the woman who is always at his side, ready with comfort. He longs for the one who could not be possessed, the one whose detachment forced him to confront his own weakness. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And indeed, when a woman seduces without touching, most of the suffering occurs not in her presence, but in her absence. His imagination magnifies her silence into symphonies, her distance into labyrinths. She becomes myth because she is not present enough to become ordinary. But there is another truth hidden here. This form of seduction is not sustainable for the man who refuses to grow. For him, it becomes torment, a cycle of obsession without transformation. The woman remains untouchable, and he remains unwhole. Yet for the man who dares to face his shadow, to see in her not a savior but a summons, her allure becomes the beginning of individuation. She awakens him to the work he must do within himself. In this way, the woman who unconsciously seduces is not merely an object of desire. She is an initiator. She opens the door to his deeper self, though most men would rather stand outside, pounding on the closed gate of her mystery, than step into the darkness of their own soul. Still, the gate remains, beckoning, and in the echo of her absence, in the ache of her silence, he may finally realize that the work of becoming whole cannot be outsourced to another. There is a peculiar weight in the gaze of a woman who does not need to perform. It is not the practiced stare of seduction, not the deliberate spark of manipulation, but something far more unsettling. She looks through rather than at, as though measuring the distance between who a man pretends to be and who he truly is. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow, the confrontation with what lies hidden beneath the polished surface of persona. For many men, such a gaze feels unbearable. It strips away the armor, exposes the fractures, reveals the hollowness of borrowed confidence. And yet, precisely because it unsettles, it also seduces. A man is not captivated by what feels comfortable. He is captivated by what makes him restless. Comfort he forgets, but restlessness he carries. The woman who unconsciously awakens this in him has no need to touch, for her very presence destabilizes his carefully arranged facade. He begins to wonder what she sees, what she knows, what truth she holds in her silence. The mystery is not in what she reveals, but in what she withholds. That withholding becomes a mirror in which his ego unravels. This is the paradox of feminine energy. It attracts not by chasing, but by retreating. It is water refusing to be grasped, flame refusing to be cupped. And the more a man grasps, the more it slips away. His hunger intensifies not because she gives, but because she does not. Detachment becomes a drug, and he is left addicted to absence. Marcus Aurelius warned that what is outside our control should not govern our peace, but the man who encounters such a woman often finds himself enslaved to what he cannot command. The feminine mystique that stirs him arises from authenticity, not artifice, not pretending to be beyond reach. She simply is beyond reach because she belongs to herself. She does not barter her soul for approval, does not dilute her essence for belonging. In Jungian terms, she embodies the self, the archetype of wholeness that transcends the dualities of persona and shadow. The male unconscious responds instinctively to this wholeness. He senses in her what he has not yet achieved, and he cannot help but long for it. And here lies a deeper layer of seduction. She is not only desired as a woman, she is envied as an archetype. She carries what he craves: completion, sovereignty, freedom from the restless need to prove. When he watches her walk away, the ache is not only for her body, but for her essence. He longs for the peace she carries, for the silence she inhabits without fear. He confuses this longing for love, but in truth, it is hunger for what he has denied within himself. This is why women who do not touch often haunt men more than women who give everything. The memory of intimacy fades, but the memory of mystery lingers. The woman who touched his body but revealed her desperation is easily forgotten. But the woman who revealed nothing, who stood apart in her sovereignty, becomes unforgettable. Her silence echoes louder than another woman's affection. Her absence burns more fiercely than another woman's closeness. You may have witnessed this pattern yourself, the way men return again and again, not to the woman who nourished them endlessly, but to the one who withheld, who disappeared, who refused to be conquered. This is not cruelty, it is psychology. The male psyche cannot let go of the unsolved riddle. Jung warned that what remains unconscious is lived out as fate. The man who refuses to confront his shadow becomes bound to the women who awaken it, doomed to circle their memory like a moth circling flame. Yet the woman who embodies this power must tread carefully. For her detachment is not a game, not a tactic to wield against others, but a natural expression of her own wholeness. If she turns it into manipulation, she loses its essence. The true seduction lies not in calculation, but in authenticity. She does not need to play hard to get, because she already is hard to get. Her soul is not for sale. In a world where many scramble to prove worth through touch, attention, and endless availability, the woman who refrains becomes revolutionary. She says with her presence, "I am already whole. Your recognition is unnecessary. Your grasping cannot contain me." And in saying this, even without words, she ignites a desire deeper than desire itself, the desire for freedom, for wholeness, for the union of opposites. This is why she does not chase, does not cling, does not plead. She knows that what is real will remain, and what leaves was never meant to stay. Her seduction is not in the grasp, but in the letting go. It is the archetypal call of the feminine mystery. Come closer if you dare, but know that I will not lose myself to hold you. For the man, this is unbearable, and yet it is precisely the unbearable that transforms him. He is left with a choice: to curse her absence or to face his own emptiness, to remain enslaved to projection or to begin the inner work of individuation. The woman becomes both wound and medicine, both loss and revelation. Without touching, she awakens him to the truth he has long ignored, that no one else can complete him. There is a hidden violence in the way absence works upon the human psyche. When a woman withdraws without anger, without explanation, simply returning to herself, it destabilizes the structure of a man's ego more than any confrontation could. He can resist words, he can fight accusations, but he cannot fight a silence that does not break. The Stoics taught that true strength lies in indifference to what lies beyond one's control. Yet here, the man faces the most painful form of indifference, the indifference of the feminine he craves, the silence of the mystery he cannot command. Jung would call this an encounter with the archetype of the anima. In the unconscious of every man lies an image of the eternal feminine, both muse and tormentor, nurturer and destroyer. When a woman stands sovereign, when she neither flatters nor begs, she begins to embody that image. She becomes more than herself. She becomes symbol. To the man, she ceases to be an individual and becomes myth. And myths are never forgotten. They burn into the collective unconscious with a permanence no human touch could equal. This is why so many men speak of the one that got away. It is not merely nostalgia. It is the lingering ache of unfinished projection. He did not lose her. He lost the piece of himself he had cast upon her. Her silence returns it to him, unwanted, like a mirror forced into his trembling hands. He does not want to see himself, but he must. And in that reflection, obsession grows. You may believe that seduction requires effort, but the deepest seduction requires restraint. To withhold is to awaken longing. To remain sovereign is to ignite hunger. To stay silent is to invite imagination. And imagination, when unanchored, can enslave a man for years. Seneca observed that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The man who cannot forget her proves this truth daily, haunted not by her presence, but by the endless stories he tells himself about her absence. Notice how his pursuit changes in the face of her detachment. At first, he may chase with confidence, certain she will yield. When she does not, he grows restless, then obsessed, then desperate. What was once desire becomes need. What was once pleasure becomes torment. Her refusal to collapse into accessibility does not repel him. It ensnares him more deeply. He does not ask, "Why does she not want me?" Instead, he asks, "What flaw in me makes her untouched by my charm?" The question corrodes his certainty, dismantles his pride, and in that dismantling, he becomes vulnerable to the deeper work of transformation. This is the unconscious mechanism. She seduces not by touch, but by summoning his shadow. He cannot explain why he feels unworthy in her presence, why her silence unsettles him more than another's cruelty. But it is there, gnawing at him, demanding he either rise to meet his incompleteness or collapse into obsession. Jung taught that the shadow, if ignored, festers and controls life from the dark. Yet if faced, it becomes the key to individuation. She, without touching, brings him to that threshold. The woman herself may not intend this. She may simply be living in alignment with her own essence, refusing to perform, refusing to contort herself for approval. But her authenticity carries a force the unconscious cannot ignore. She does not give away too much of her presence, and precisely because she withholds, men are forced to confront their hunger. She embodies a scarcity more intoxicating than abundance ever could. Think of it this way: the banquet that never ends soon dulls the appetite, but the taste one is denied lingers forever on the tongue of memory. This is why detachment becomes more erotic than touch. This is why absence burns hotter than presence. The woman who walks away with dignity, who carries her solitude like a crown, becomes unforgettable. Not because she touched, but because she refused to touch. And yet, this power is not cruelty. It is truth. She does not deny to wound. She denies to preserve herself. She does not withhold as punishment. She withholds because she is not desperate. She knows that her soul is not currency, her presence not a product. She carries herself as one already whole, already enough. And wholeness is magnetic. Wholeness is erotic. Wholeness is what the fractured ego cannot resist. For men, this is both torment and revelation. Torment because it awakens an ache they cannot soothe with conquest. Revelation because it shows them the path inward. If they dare, they will see that the woman they chase is not the answer, but the mirror, that what they long for in her, silence, sovereignty, completeness, they must learn to cultivate within themselves. Only then does the obsession break. Only then does the projection dissolve. But until that moment, she will haunt him. She will exist in the corridors of his unconscious, not as a lover, but as a myth, untouchable, sovereign, eternal. The dance between feminine sovereignty and masculine obsession reaches its sharpest edge in the quiet moments, when nothing is said and nothing is done. It is there, in the absence of performance, that the man feels most pierced. He senses not rejection, but indifference, the cold clarity that she exists beyond the gravitational pull of his ego. Jung warned that the ego does not die quietly. It clings, it resists, it scrambles to preserve its illusion of control. When faced with a woman who cannot be moved by charm or demand, the ego does not surrender gracefully. It twists longing into obsession, projection into worship, and silence into unbearable noise. This is why many men confuse attraction with destiny. They say she is the one, when what they truly mean is she is the reflection of my incompleteness. The anima within them projects onto her the image of salvation. She becomes the symbol of the missing piece, the promised wholeness. But the unconscious plays a dangerous trick. What they chase is not her, but themselves. She is simply the mirror, and mirrors seduce not by what they give, but by what they reveal. The woman who unconsciously carries this power does not have to try. She is not following strategies from a book, nor is she plotting a path to conquest. She is simply aligned with herself, unwilling to sacrifice her essence for fleeting approval. In a world obsessed with visibility, she remains hidden in plain sight, her mystery intact, her value untouched. This unyielding stance is erotic in its own right, because the unconscious does not hunger for the easily won. It hungers for what resists, what remains elusive, what forces engagement with the unknown. You may have seen this unfold. A man grows restless in the company of a woman who bends too easily, yet becomes inflamed by the one who will not bend at all. It is not rational, it is archetypal. Jung described archetypes as primordial images buried deep within the psyche, shaping desires that consciousness cannot explain. The unattainable woman becomes one such archetype, stirring not only desire but dread. For in her presence, he feels his own smallness, and in his smallness he feels both shame and hunger. The paradox of her power is this: she does not need to resist actively, she only needs to exist authentically. Her allure is not in what she does, but in what she refuses to do. Refuse to beg, refuse to chase, refuse to trade her dignity for attention. Her refusal is not rebellion, but alignment. She has stepped outside the endless performance of pleasing and entered the sanctuary of her own sovereignty. That sovereignty radiates outward like unseen fire, warming some, burning others, but leaving no one untouched. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed by the color of its thoughts. The man obsessed with such a woman soon finds his soul dyed in her absence. He remembers her in solitude, replays her silence in his mind, and interprets every fragment of interaction as though decoding scripture. What he does not understand is that it is not she who enslaves him, but his own mind. She has done nothing except remain herself. The rest is the work of his projection. And yet, projection is a powerful thing. Many men spend years bound to it, unable to move beyond the memory of the one who would not yield. They return to her in dreams, in regrets, in fantasies. They measure other women against her, not realizing that they are not comparing women at all. They are comparing reflections of their own lost wholeness. This is why obsession becomes addictive. He is not addicted to her. He is addicted to the part of himself she forced him to see. For the woman, this dynamic can feel like a burden. She may wonder why her silence, her detachment, her refusal to overextend seems to provoke such intensity in others. But this is not something she creates. It is something she evokes. The feminine aligned with its depth awakens the unconscious in those around her, whether they are ready or not. Some will flee, unsettled by the confrontation. Others will cling, mistaking their longing for love. Few will recognize the truth that she is not salvation, but signal. Her presence, untouched and untouchable, points toward the deeper work. She is a reminder that no man can outsource completion. No man can borrow sovereignty. No man can consume another into wholeness. She becomes both temptation and teacher, though she does not set out to teach. Simply by existing in her own fullness, she exposes the lack in others. And exposure, even when unintended, is always transformative. So the man stands at a crossroads. Continue chasing the ghost of what he projects upon her, or turn inward and begin the slow work of individuation. Most will chase, for the path inward is harder, darker, lonelier. But those who dare will find that what they sought in her was never external at all. It was the forgotten union of their own psyche, the reconciliation of shadow and self, the balance of anima and animus, the long-delayed acceptance of incompleteness. And the woman, she walks on, untouched. She carries her silence like a crown, her solitude like a temple. She does not need to touch because her very being has already altered the space around her. She is mystery, and mystery does not explain itself. The deepest seduction is not in the gesture, not in the gaze, but in the stillness a woman carries when she has nothing left to prove. This stillness is not absence. It is presence distilled to its purest form. It is the weightless gravity of a woman who has faced her shadows, who has made peace with her contradictions, and who has chosen to stand sovereign in the silence of her own being. Men approach her with expectation, but expectation collapses in her orbit. She does not play the role he scripts for her. She does not become what his longing demands. She remains herself, and in that refusal lies the most dangerous allure of all. Carl Jung wrote that individuation is the process of becoming whole, and wholeness is always magnetic. The unconscious recognizes it instantly, even when the conscious mind resists. A man may think he is drawn to her beauty, her voice, or her form. But beneath those surface projections, what truly seizes him is the rare recognition of completeness. She is not seeking what is missing, she is embodying what has already been found. And because he cannot name this force, he calls it seduction, though it is nothing more than truth standing naked before him. In this truth there is no chase, no strategy, no manipulation. The mature woman no longer bargains with her essence. She does not dim her flame to soothe insecurity, nor does she burn brighter to demand attention. Her light is steady, unshaken by the wind. To some men, this feels like rejection, for their egos cannot tether her. To others, it feels like homecoming, for they glimpse in her presence the part of themselves long exiled. And so, whether they remain or retreat, the encounter changes them. They cannot unsee her. They cannot unfeel the silent invitation to rise to their own wholeness. This is the paradox. The woman who does not seduce becomes the most seductive of all. Her refusal to bend into a man's fantasy becomes the very dream he cannot abandon. Her silence becomes a roar in his unconscious. Her stillness becomes motion within him. She awakens not by reaching out, but by standing unshaken, her very existence a mirror he cannot look away from. In her, he faces both his hunger and his fear. Hunger for the union he cannot control, and fear of the depth he must enter to meet her as an equal. Stoic wisdom tells us that freedom comes not from clinging, but from release. Marcus Aurelius spoke of the soul finding its strength when it withdraws from unnecessary entanglement. So too with the sovereign woman. She does not cling, not because she is cold, but because she understands the cost of tethering herself to a man who has not yet tethered himself to his own soul. She knows that to bind herself prematurely is to betray the temple she has built within. And so she stands at the threshold, not closed, but not collapsed, allowing only those who approach with reverence to step inside. In this final recognition, seduction ceases to be an act and becomes an atmosphere. It is no longer something she does, but something she is. She has dissolved the need for external validation. She has buried the hunger for constant proof. She has walked through her shadows and returned with light that cannot be stolen. This is not the fragile allure of youth, nor the fleeting magnetism of novelty. This is the enduring flame of a woman who has become herself. It is the flame of individuation, and it cannot be extinguished. The men who encounter her may call her mysterious, untouchable, even dangerous. But she is none of these things. She is simply whole. And wholeness unsettles those who have not yet faced their own fractures. Some will run from her, seeking the comfort of illusions elsewhere. Others will return again and again, drawn not by her body, not by her words, but by the silent question she embodies. Will you meet me as yourself, or will you keep hiding? The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.